Super Mario Bros. 3 was a big f***ing deal. I don't think it's a stretch to call it one of the most anticipated games ever made. Mario fans, new and old, were losing their minds about the most ambitious Mario title yet. Nintendo, for their part, fueled the hype train harder than CD Projekt Red did for Cyberpunk. They plastered Mario 3 everywhere they could. They put it in Nintendo Power, made some really weird cult-like advertisements, and made an entire movie just to flex some footage at the end. Once the game was in people's hands, they realized that the wait was worth it. It's widely considered the best game on the NES, one of Mario's greatest adventures, and one of the greatest games of all time. In many ways, this game reminds me of the same leap that we saw from Atari platformers to the first Super Mario Bros. It's a better looking and playing game than pretty much anything that came before it. Like Doom, Mario 64, or Tetris, Super Mario Bros. 3 is a certified hood classic, which stands the test of time to be as fun today as it ever has been. To create the, at the time, most ambitious Mario game, Nintendo would need to put together the largest team so far. The team would be a good mix of old and new faces, and about 3 times the size of the first Mario game. I'm gonna run through the staff. I don't speak Japanese and my enunciation's awful, so apologies in advance. Shigeru Miyamoto would be the producer and director for Super Mario Bros. 3, but this time he split his director duties with Takashi Tezuka, who previously directed the Lost Levels. Miyamoto would bring in an assistant director as well in the form of Hideki Kono, who got his start as an assistant director on Super Mario Bros. 2 USA or Doki Doki Panic. The programming crew was helmed by veteran lead programmer Toshihiko Nagako. He oversaw Toshihiro Iwaki and Shigehiro Kasamatsu, who made their series debut with Doki Doki Panic. Rounding out the crew of programmers was longtime series veteran Kazukai Morita. The largest part of the crew was the level designers, consisting of co-director Takashi Tezuka, series newcomer and eventual Animal Crossing creator Katsuya Eguchi, assistant director Hideki Kono, and Doki Doki Panic director Kensuke Tanabe. Like the previous titles, Koji Kondo would return to be the sole composer. Rounding off the team was character designers, consisting of co-director Takashi Tezuka, assistant director Hideki Kono, and Nintendo newcomer Hiroyuki Kimura. With the largest team in series history, early development for Mario 3 would begin shortly after the release of the Lost Levels in 1986. Due to this, Tanabe and many others would be working double duty during early development, as they would still be developing Doki Doki Panic. Despite the size and talent of the team, the project was hitting roadblocks in the first stages of development. Before they could move forward, the team would need to answer a deceptively simple question: what is Super Mario Bros.? This sounds like a pretty stupid question now. I mean, my dog knows what a Mario is and she's fucking dead. How could anybody not know what a Mario game is? How could they not know what a Mario game should be? These seem like simple, easily answered questions, but it's only a simple question now, because we're looking at this with decades of hindsight and hundreds of Mario games working to our advantage. But in 1986, what Mario wasn't that clear. This was hot after the release of The Lost Levels, which was only the second game in the series. Despite only being the second game, the team was already tired of the Mario formula. This led them, particularly co-director Takashi Tezuka, to start asking fundamental questions about what Mario even is. Is Mario exclusively a platform series? Is Mario just a linear game about moving left to right? Can Mario fly? This last question dominated early development discussions and would go on to leave lasting marks on the game that we eventually would receive. Early on, Mario 3 was not meant to be a series of linear left to right levels. Tezuka dreamed of a 3D world for Mario to explore. The team talk about it in Zelda-like terms, but from their description it sounds more like 3D World Runner and Super Mario 3D Land made an 8-bit baby. The general idea of Mario 3 would be that you would look at Mario from a somewhat bird's eye view while platforming around, and maybe Mario could fly sometimes. Considering they were using NES hardware, this idea just was not working. It was too ambitious for the console and would ultimately be dropped, with things like the checkerboard patterns on the title screen being the only real remnants of the Mario 3 that wasn't. With his initial idea shot down, Tezuka still had reservations about keeping things too similar. He thought that Mario could do more after he kind of burnt himself out with the lost levels. He knew a game which was too close to the first two games would be a disappointment. He wanted a departure from the formula. In his own words, he wanted to find a way to change everything.
You understand the gravity of that request. Now, the seed that we plant in this man's mind will grow into an idea. This idea will define him. It may come to change everything about him.
This change everything approach made the development of Super Mario Bros. 3 the longest of any Mario game to that point. Once the team decided to leave the 3D flying dream in the past and make a more traditional platformer, the problems did not stop. The project was a scattered mess of different ideas. It was growing in many different directions all at once, with everybody pitching their ideas for what should be a part of the next adventure. This is something that Miyamoto has always been very fond of doing. He likes the idea that anyone can make a real impact on the title, but this openness to many different ideas likely slowed development down. At a time when the game was in dire need of a centralized vision, the team was still experimenting with exactly what Mario could do. Due to this lack of focus, the game ballooned in development. Tezuka's description of the development process is pretty much textbook feature creep. The team was just adding and adding without thinking about the bigger picture. Every addition, no matter how insignificant it seemed at the time, increased the complexity of the game, which increases the amount of time that they needed to work on the game. And while this lack of strong direction is probably responsible for some of the coolest parts of Mario 3, it most certainly put the game behind schedule. Despite the chaotic development, the team pressed on, finally finding their footing during an extended development period. And I do mean extended. It took less time to create Mario Bros. 1 and Mario Bros. 2 combined than it took to make Mario 3. The team was used to games being finished in 9 months to a year, but with Mario 3, a year went by and the game wasn't even close to being ready for release. A second year went by and the team was closer, but they still had to crunch to get finished. The team had the core mechanics decided on and the engine finished, so the only thing left to do was, well, make a video game. A game is nothing without levels, and at this point the game didn't seem to have them. The levels only existed as graph paper representations. This meant that a subset of the team would program map data by hand all day, every day. Once the levels were finished being put into the computer, other members would meticulously break down the levels and make changes to give back to the mappers. Every day was inputting levels, playtesting levels, and fixing levels. Miyamoto might recall this somewhat fondly with a smile on his face, but it honestly sounds like it was a Mario-themed hellscape. Speaking of hellscapes, while his colleagues were working on the game, composer Koji Kondo was in his own development hell. Tezuka wasn't the only one that wanted to completely change everything about Mario. Kondo wanted to find a completely new sound for Super Mario Bros. He wanted to create something that was undoubtedly Mario while also being fresh and unique. Kondo approached the soundtrack in a fundamentally different way than the first game. In the first game, he more or less made music to go along with what he was seeing on screen, in the same way that a film composer might do. In Mario 3, he thought about the soundtrack genre first, but he couldn't answer the question, what's Mario's favorite genre? If you ask me what kind of music Mario probably listens to, I would say he might be a Heart kind of guy. Maybe listening to a little bit of Styx after he found one of their albums in the sewer where it fucking belongs. But Koji Kondo figured with the mushrooms and that fire flower, Mario was a big reggae guy. Again, with hindsight, it's really easy to point out how a reggae Mario soundtrack sounds ridiculous. We know how Mario sounds now. Mario sounds like mostly upbeat, big and happy jams with some spookier and darker elements to accentuate more dramatic levels. Mario does not sound like reggae. But at the time, the only real Mario soundtrack was World 1-1 and not much else. At some point, he abandoned the idea of making it reggae and just made music. and like all great artists, it sounds like he was pretty sure that it was complete trash and had no idea if it would fit in the game. He notes how he showed Miyamoto and Tezuka the final world themes at the very end of production. Even after all that time working on them, he still had no idea which versions should be used in the game. Lucky for him, his colleagues were able to pick out their favorites that fit best, and after more than 2 years in development, Mario 3 was released on October 23, 1988, making its way stateside sometime in early 1990. By some miracle, after all the time and turmoil in development, Mario 3 was a huge success both financially and critically. It garnered a 35 out of 40 from Japanese Games Magazine Famitsu and a 36 out of 40 from EGM when it came to the States. Though I don't quite understand how Ed could give the game a 9 out of 10 while also calling it the greatest game ever on NES. Then what the hell's a 10 out of 10, Ed? Come on. The game was a hit with fans as well, racking up huge sales numbers. In 1988, it would have been the best-selling game in Japan if it wasn't for Dragon Quest III setting insane sales records. Mario 3 was also a hit overseas, with the United States selling 250,000 units in the first 2 days. By 1990, the game had sold 8 million copies worldwide. By 1992, the game had generated more than $500 million for Nintendo. No matter what region of the world, the game was a commercial and critical blockbuster, cementing Mario's legendary status and showing that Nintendo were far from out of ideas for their pudgy plumber. That's it for the history, but before I get into my experience with the game, I want to say that I played both the All-Stars and NES versions. I think that both of them are great ways to play the game. I'm going to be using footage from the All-Stars version of the game because this seizure is distracting. I know why it happens, but I think the All-Stars version looks cleaner and it matches my Mario 2 video, which you can watch by hitting the button here. Besides this tangent, I'm not really going to talk about the graphics. Both versions look great, but you guys have eyes, so you know that. I do somewhat prefer the NES sprites, with Mario sporting black overalls and everything just being a little bit crispier, but I don't think you can really go wrong playing one version over the other. With that little side note out of the way, is the game any good? Did you read the title? Does it sound like I'm fucking around? Yeah, it's beyond good, dude. It's one of the best games on the NES, if not one of the best games in the entire series. It doesn't take more than a few seconds of having a controller in your hand to realize that this one is really something special. Mario 3 is one of those games that just feels fun to move in. Mario's weight, traction, momentum, and jumps feel just right. I think this is the first game where they really found it. It's hard to describe if you've never played the game, but the game feel is just so spot on. It's responsive and reactive in all the right ways, while being predictable and easy to learn, but also hard to master. Super Mario Bros. 3 is the first game in the series to feel modern. Not modern by 1988 standards, but like modern by now standards. Up until this point, the series had felt like NES games in every sense of the word. I loved the NES and played a lot of the games when I was younger, but many of the platformers have a significant chunky feeling to them. Castlevania 3, which hit the US market the same year as Mario 3 did, still feels like moving a tank and not a person. I love Castlevania 3, please don't kill me. Ninja Gaiden 2, while being fast and responsive, still feels extremely stiff. Even classics like Mega Man or DuckTales feel stilted in comparison to Mario 3. I love all of these games. They were all trying different things and they're all fantastic in their own ways, but they don't have the same kind of free-flowing movement that Mario 3 does. Mario 3 has a specific fluidity that was just rare to experience on the NES and a first for the series. It's such a step up from the first game, it's hard to believe that they were made by the same people on the same hardware. The difference in feel between the first game and this one is seriously astronomical. If I had to try and pin down what makes the game so fluid, it would be the air control and the traction. Previous Mario games felt a little slippery for my tastes. Mario 2 felt a little bit better than the first one, but even then, momentum control could be a little bit difficult. In the first game, getting up to speed always felt like it took a little bit too long, and and once Mario hit top speed, it felt like driving a truck on a frozen lake. On top of that, Mario just never felt responsive. Making finite and fast adjustments was just kind of difficult. If the Belmonts were Panzers, then Mario was at F350 in his first game. Mario's truck Sona was only doubled when jumping. The first game saw Mario bringing a lot of momentum into his jumps. At top speed, hitting a full jump was like hitting a ramp with the good old Duke boys.
General. Like a piece of cake.
Got that one awfully close there, Hoss.
But even when you weren't at top speed, controlling Mario's jumps took a lot of getting used to. Mario controlled more realistically, meaning that his air control was super limited. This limited air control would lock you into most of your movements. By Mario 2, the physics felt more like Looney Tunes and less like real life. Everyone felt a little bit more attached to the ground, and they were more responsive in the air. Mario 3 continued this trend of becoming a cartoon with the most responsive air control and highest amount of traction. Mario feels like he's heavy and grounded without feeling sluggish to get started or slippery to get stopped, and mid-air adjustments of jumps are possible without being so powerful that it completely negates level difficulty. As an example of what I'm talking about, this is what happens when I leap off of a platform and start holding left as soon as possible in Mario 1. And here's what it looks like in Mario 3. Some people don't like this approach because it means that you can abandon a jump while you're currently doing it, but I prefer this. If I don't think that I'm going to make a jump, I can just go back to the platform I left from and try again. I can retry the jump right away, which means more time progressing and less deadly trial and error. This is without a doubt the best Mario has ever felt on the NES, setting a bar so high that Mario 3 feels better than some platformers on the Super Nintendo. Hell, Mario 3 feels better than some platformers now. But Mario is nothing without his power-ups, and this game has them in spades. All the power-ups from the first game are back, and they work pretty much the same way as before, but the new power-ups is where things get interesting. We'll start with the more niche and minor ones. First is the Kermit suit, which is more or less worthless on land, but extraordinarily powerful in water, allowing Mario to swim with the same level of ease that he has when he runs around on the ground. Next is the hammer suit, which is similar to the Fire Flower, but Mario throws hammers instead of fires. The real useful part of these hammers is that they can damage some enemies that otherwise can't get hurt by anything else. I knew that carpenters could cast out demons, but I didn't know that they could banish ghosts as well. Yeah, that's a religion and a Mario deep cut. Keep up, boys. The real star of the show is the Tanuki suit and Super Leaf. These power-ups are very similar except for one key difference. If Mario has a Tanuki suit, he can turn invincible by pressing down and B. And I almost never remembered to use that. He can also spin around to hit things with his tail. He also can use that tail to slow his descent. But that pales in comparison to the biggest addition that this suit brings, the ability to fly. But only for 5 seconds. If you run for long enough, you'll build up a meter at the bottom of the screen. Once that bad boy fills up, you can take to the sky to let Mario roleplay as his hero JJ. You might think that this would nuke the difficulty, but it really doesn't. First, you lose the suit like anything else with just one hit. Second, with that P meter requirement, you can't just really fly over every single level. It's not necessarily hard to fill the meter up, but it's not so easy that you can be flying through each level with ease. That is, unless you have the P-Wing power-up, which essentially turns you into Kirby, allowing you to fly through the entire level as long as you don't get hit. This makes any level a pretty easy dub as long as you can survive your ears getting assaulted by this noise. The way you interact with power-ups is different in this game compared to the earlier titles. In the earlier titles, the only option you had was to hit a brick and pick up a power-up. This game still has that system, but now you can choose if you want to start a level with a power-up equipped. This doesn't sound significant on paper, but it's a pretty huge change and goes a long way to making the game a lot easier. But it also increases the amount of options that you have for playing a stage. This gives niche power-ups a bigger time to shine as well, allowing players to use use something like the frog suit when they think it's the most helpful, or deciding to use a P-wing when the level is just too hard for them. It makes the game easier, but I think it's a good trade-off to increase the amount of player choice that you have. Great core movement and powers really don't mean anything if the levels themselves aren't good though. I can't say the levels are good enough to justify the pretty terrible conditions of the people that made them, but these definitely are a series highlight. Mario 3 is the first game in the series to be more than just a series of levels. This is the game that introduced a world map to the series, a standard feature in most of Mario's adventures moving forward. While this is the way you select levels, it's not its only purpose. This is where you can preload those power-ups that I was talking about earlier. You can also go to Toad houses to gamble for more lives or more power-ups by playing different minigames or getting gifts. The world map also has some alternate routes if you find a certain level too hard and just want to skip it. Speaking of skipping, the world map allows you to do quite a lot of that. I think that this stuff was probably thrown in to compensate for not having a save feature in a game that's pretty long, but either way, you can skip to the end of this game really easily. There's the simple skips like grabbing a cloud power-up to just fly over a level, to the more in-depth skips like finding a flute to go to a world select menu and skip entire chunks of the game. It's for all these reasons that the world map is a serious game changer. It not only gives you some freedom in the levels that you play, but also really blows the hinges off what you can do in your approach to the levels. These additions allow you to more or less set your own difficulty. The game does give you tons of power-ups, and you're probably going to be drowning in them by the end of the game, but using them is your choice. If you wanted to see the end of the game, you could overdose on these power-ups and skips. Alternatively, if you wanted the game to be as hard as possible, you could simply ignore all the power-ups and play through the level that way. These maps also serve non-gameplay purposes too. This is the first game in the series to really theme the levels. I mean, Mario 2 had theming, but it was pretty much a singular theme for the entire game. Whereas Mario 3 debuts what would become pretty traditional Mario theming. You have your standard grassy world, desert world, ice world, and your water world. Holy fuck, did somebody say water world? Are you guys talking about my movie?
Oh, no, Kevin. No, we're not talking about that.
Well, no, it sounded like you were talking about my movie.
No, I'm talking about Mario 3.
The Water World.
No,
with Kevin
I know.
Costner. Me, that's me.
No, I know
Are you
it's a
guys
fine
talking about
film,
my
but I'm not talking about that Water World.
Are you gonna
I'm
talk
not,
about
and
the
I don't.
movie?
No, I don't
Dude,
think
I
I
bet
will.
That make you so many views. You should talk about
No,
the
it
movie.
won't. No, it will
Talk
not make
about my
views,
movie. Talk
dude.
about Water
It
World.
won't. It won't. It's a fine movie.
It almost won an Academy Award. It almost sunk Universal Pictures, dude. But have you been on the ride?
Yeah, the ride's
so
better than the movie,
sick.
though.
The ride is so cool.
Okay, the ride's better than the
Well,
movie.
you'll keep me posted if you talk
No,
about
I'll
the
keep.
movie,
Okay,
right?
I'll keep you posted.
We'll do Waterworld 2
Yeah,
together.
no,
Are you
we'll
talking
totally.
about
Yeah,
Waterworld?
we'll totally do Waterworld 2 together.
I love
Yeah, we'll do
Waterworld.
that.
It's my favorite
But there's some
movie.
pretty
It's
out
the
there.
best movie I
Kevin,
ever did. I never ever came close to getting to that level.
Are you finished?
Perfection again.
I'm doing a video.
Talk about Waterworld. Are we talking about Waterworld?
Jesus Christ. But there's some pretty out there theming too, which is a large part of what makes this game so memorable. The final world is mostly a gauntlet of vehicle levels set behind a hellscape map. There's a whole set of levels in the sky which require you to climb a biblically accurate version of the Tower of Babel in an attempt to join God in the heavens. To put into perspective Mario's power level, it works, and he's able to mount the heavens. But the lamest looking world actually has the coolest levels in it, and that would be Big Island. Yes, it is just a gimmick of everything being huge, but you know what? I love it for some stupid reason. This attempt at having greater thematic variety goes a long way to making each level feel more unique. I also think it goes a long way to fight any kind of fatigue. This is the longest Mario adventure on the NES, and without the level theming, I think I probably would have gotten bored sooner. In the same way that the levels are visually unique, they also bring mechanical uniqueness. This game has everything from fully underwater levels to auto-scrollers to climbing puzzle levels. Not every level in the game is a banger. I personally didn't care for most of the water levels, but otherwise none of these really stood out as being particularly bad levels. The level's short length helps with this too. If a level is really grating, it's only going to take a few minutes at most to get past it. The game also introduces a thing that would be pretty standard to the Mario formula moving forward: single level gimmicks. A lot of the levels are standard side-scrolling A to B affairs, but other levels will teach you a mechanic just to use it for a level and then never come back to it, something that the 3D games would thrive on doing years down the line. There's just a lot of care put into these levels, and if you poke around, you can find a fair amount of secrets within them as well. Out of all the NES Mario games, this one has the strongest set of levels by far. Even if there was no world map and this game was a straight shot linear adventure, these levels would still have more charm and identity than most of Mario 1 or 2. Oh fuck, I almost forgot to say anything about the music. I don't think it's my favorite in the series because the orchestral stuff makes me bust a pretty fat nut, but it's still a fantastic soundtrack. Kondo created a soundtrack that sounds much different than previous entries, but still sounds extremely Mario. He included all the fun bounciness, spooky sections, and threw in plenty of callbacks. I think that the world themes go a very long way to making each of the worlds feel unique. World 1 sounds like an invitation to pick up a controller and explore this new adventure. World 3 sounds a bit like sitting on a beach on a sunny afternoon, which fits the water and desert theme. World 6 sounds cold, desolate, and kinda creepy. But my favorite of all the world themes is probably World 7 for how different it is. It feels like hanging out in a gangster's nightclub or something. It has these jazzy elements, but also being kinda dark. I don't know if this is supposed to be electric guitar on the NES, but I like the sound. The music that plays within the levels is great too. Overworld 1 might not match the iconicness of the World 1 music, but it still sounds distinctly Mario, though I personally prefer Overworld 2 by just a hair. The underground music is the exact same as it's always been, although it does have a little bit of updating, but the callbacks don't stop there. The star theme returns to the spotlight, sounding almost the exact same as it used to. When you play the music box, there's a nice little surprise too. It's a variation of Mario 1's Overworld music. It looks like Kondo really was a trendsetter, hitting that slowed and reverb trend before anybody else did. The soundtrack is pretty much all killer, no filler, and for how unsure he was about his own pieces, I don't think he had anything to worry about. This soundtrack sets the mood and is one of the best in the entire series. Mario 3 is like a great sandwich with each ingredient complementing another ingredient to make a pretty perfect meal. The music and the visuals and the pure gameplay all mix into a blend that isn't just a foundational game in the series, but a foundational game in the platforming genre more broadly. Mario 3 set a new bar for what a platformer could be. It showed the way towards a more grand rendition of the genre. The hype was real and well worth the wait for the fans. Judging by the amount of pure cash it printed, I'm pretty sure it was probably worth it to Nintendo as well. When I think of a top 100 video game, Mario 3 is hands down on that list. A monumental leap forward for the genre, and a platformer that I think holds up surprisingly well for being more than 30 years old. If you haven't played this one, do it. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised with how it holds up. Have you guys played Mario 3? Do you think that Mario 3 holds up after all this time? I personally think it's the first game in the series that doesn't feel really old, and I do think that it holds up, but maybe I'm just nostalgia blind. Do you prefer Mario 3 or Mario World? I think this is a little civil war in the Mario community. I'll probably do a little compare and contrast when I finally get around to doing Mario World, but for right now, I think I'm in the Mario 3 camp. I guess that's my way of saying I'm going to be taking a break from the Mario series. They're fun games, but I want to look at something else on the top 100 that isn't a platformer for the next one. I'm sure I'll get back around to the Mario games in time though. I hope you guys liked the video. I put a lot of effort into this one, so hit that thumbs up if you liked it, nuke the dislike button if you didn't, sub for more long-winded nonsense. I'll see you guys in the next one.
That's right, we're Japanese.